Peace, peace, peace. I am Dr. Philip Roundtree, and you are now tuned into Rhetorically Speaking. Now, usually this is where I'd hit you with the date, but this week and for the foreseeable future, you're getting two episodes. Why? Because the moment demands it. So just know you're tapped into the first of two timely, thoughtful, and unfiltered breakdowns in a single week. For the new listeners and viewers, welcome. Let me ground you on what this show is. This ain't your run of the mills news hour. Of course, we're coming with the facts, but also with critical thought, cultural memory, and unflinching honesty. We speak truth to power, even when the mic shakes. What I'm here for is accountability. What I'm here for is truth on behalf of the people. Now, I'm sure you've had similar moments, whether professionally, where you might have spoken while afraid, personally, where you had the option to be silent, but being silent was just as scary as speaking. It's you chose to use your voice. And that's what you're getting here. Me, us, we, here together, because we family, we community. Now let's be clear. The opinions I offer here are mine and mine only. It's my voice, my viewpoint, not that of any sponsor, partner, or licensor of this show. If you have any thoughts, feelings, or concerns, the same thing I tell my students. Listen, just hit a brother up. We can have a conversation. It's me. One of my favorite rappers, I'm not going to say his name because he does have a controversial history that I continue to reckon with. But we're going to say that hip hop conversation for another show. But a poignant line he said was, I'm Ted Danson. I stand behind my bars. And when I first heard it, I was like, woo, yeah, that's it. Now, if that makes sense, it's a double entendre, right? We know Ted Danson from Cheers. He owned the bar. And so when we talk about bars, we talk about things that we said. Y'all get it. I ain't got to go that deep into it. But this is all me. Now, what is my ask of you as a viewer, as a listener? I just ask that you think deeply, that you ask questions of yourself, of me, of the politicians, of the celebrities, of community, because that's the only way we get free. Now, with that said, let's get into it. So I'm going to let you know what we have going on later. We're going to be talking about 45/47's museum purge and attempted war on black memory. Then we'll hit our quick hit news of the day. And as always, we'll wrap with Dr. Phil's Black Thought of the Day, where I give real, relatable reflection, connecting our history and culture with everyday life. But first, let's dig into the renewed attacks on university protesters, especially those with legal visas. So 45/47 has launched his latest crackdown on protesters. Columbia University was ground zero. Now it's expanded to Cornell, Swarthmore, and other colleges and universities. Now I want you to know, you will never hear me say that man's name. And if I do, you might as well say it's a Freudian slip. All right? Because why? If you old enough to remember Candyman, you know if you say his name, what? 5 times. I'm going to let you in a little bit into something right quick. I always thought it was 3. I thought if you said Candyman name 3 times in the dark in the mirror that he was going to show up. But apparently it's 5. But for 45/47, because those are the terms that he served as president of this settler colony, we going to use 3. All right, so you ain't going to hear me say his name. But as I was saying, Columbia University was ground zero. Now it's expanded to Cornell, Swarthmore, and other colleges and universities. They've issued suspensions, expulsions, and revoked degrees for students who are just doing what? Exercising their First Amendment rights, like we all do literally every day. Now, under the Immigration and Nationality Act, also known as the INA, legal residents now face deportation. But guess what? We all know white supremacy going to justify itself at every turn. So now they're claiming that student protests could threaten U.S. foreign policy interests. Let me be clear. This is McCarthyism reincarnated. Now you might ask, well, Dr. Phil, Black Dr. Phil, I always say if you see me in the streets, call me Phil. Why? Because, the degrees, I ain't really worried about that. This is about knowledge for community, so you could call me Phil. What is McCarthyism? And just like some of y'all, I had to Google it initially when I heard it because I love history, but you don't know everything. So McCarthyism, that's when propaganda and fear tactics are used to silence dissent. And dissent is treated like treason. Let me say that again. That's when propaganda and fear tactics are used to silence dissent. And dissent is treated like treason. I'm going to give you some examples of that and how it's going to resonate for black folk in a little bit. So under the INA, a non-citizen can be deported if the Secretary of State believes their presence may cause, and I quote, potentially serious adverse foreign policy consequences. Yet and still, there are supposed to be exceptions, like protecting acts that will be lawful if done by a U.S. citizen. Like say what? You guessed it. Nonviolent protests. And don't get me, again, these are my words. These ain't the words of anybody else. I'm not sure of any movement at any point during history, especially regarding persons of the global majority. Because I don't say non-white, I don't say BIPOC, I say persons of the global majority. Because when we look at the world from a global perspective, it's more of us than them. But I don't know of any real substantial change that's taken place without a little fisticuffs. Now, I'm Martin Luther King nonviolent with it. Personally, I'm too pretty to fight. Never been in a fight in my life. Yeah, never been in a fight in my life. But when we talk about systemic change, no matter where we are, violence has always played a part. But in this instance, we know that violence here in the United States, I'm about to say, is frowned upon. We know certain folk could be physically violent if they want. But typically, for those who don't have that privilege, you're going to do what? You're going to go to jail. All right? But nonviolent protest, that's not supposed to have consequences because it doesn't for U.S. citizens. But of course, there's a loophole here. If the Secretary of State deems it compelling foreign policy interest, they can override everything. So what are we saying? We talking about thoughts and feelings. Because that's all this is, right? We talking about thoughts and feelings. Yo, I feel like you gonna mess up my relationship with Israel. So yeah, you gonna have to roll. Cause what the Wu-Tang Clan say? Cash rules everything around me. Cream get the money. Dollar bills, y'all. And that's what this is about. Thoughts and feelings, hard cash, so they can override everything. So when Marco Rubio, who's the Secretary of State, says people like Mahmoud Khalil and others are undermining the fight against anti-Semitism, boom, we gonna get you up out the paint. You're deported. Now listen, legal teams for sure are right to fight for this, because we're going to talk about how this extends past those who are legal immigrants. We know that this is a blatant First Amendment violation. And then just the discretionary nature of it all. It's what? It's racist. It's xenophobic. It's sexist. It's patriarchy. And as you continue to tune into me, you're going to hear me use often those terms that's coined by the Jegna, the ancestor, Bell Hooks, all underscore, if you ain't know, which she called white supremacist, capitalistic, patriarchal, white imperialist system that we're all navigating. And it's not just theoretical, it's real. Now take the story of Mamadou Tal, a Cornell grad student and citizen of the UK and Gambia. Listen to what I said. Grad student. So he's either paid this university with his money or with his labor. If he's paying with his labor, he's paying taxes. I know. It's too. Let me chill. We ain't gonna get into that just yet. His visa was revoked for participating in pro-Palestine protests. I was out there too. I went to 1 or 2, but I realized that my temperament wasn't set up for protest. I'm going to sit there and argue with 12, with the fuzz, as my mama would call them. I ain't gonna go too far with the language when it comes to identifying what police in America are. Modern day enslavement catches. Nonetheless, the U.S. State Department considered his presence adversarial to foreign policy interests, right? That thoughts and feelings. Jimmies were rustled. So instead of facing deportation, Tal chose to leave. He said he wanted to walk out free and with his head held high. He no longer trusted that the courts or this country will protect his safety or his voice. Tal sued the government. And in retaliation, they attempted to deport him. And the judge on the case said, listen, I just don't have the jurisdiction to stay their order of deportation. And instead of fighting the fight, because once you come into this country, especially as an African and an individual of the diaspora, you fighting the fight soon as you step foot on this soil. He made the executive decision. Yo, listen, I'm cool. I rocks with everybody here. I keep fighting, but I ain't got time for this, man. Let me go somewhere else and do what I need to do so I can not only survive, but thrive. But listen, Tal, he's not alone. At least 300 international students have had their visas revoked over protest activity, with many now in self-exile. So you have some folk that are hiding. They're hiding out because they know they're going to be disappeared. We all saw the video of that sister who's just walking, and you got a white man walking up on her in plain clothes. Like, yo, you coming with me. What? Excuse me? And this is where we start to have that conversation about what does self-defense look like, if we're honest. So folk are like, either I'm going to leave on my own terms, or you know what, I'm going to go to the honeycomb hideout until all of this boils over. Which may be in what? It could be a months, because we know that this administration has been taken to court. Or we're talking some years. I can't tell somebody if it's worth it or not. But the reality is, this is what we're up against in this country. The same country that claims to be the beacon of democracy. But let's not pretend this is isolated. This is what? Strategic. Because people will keep protesting. Why? Because police are going to continue killing and harming folk. These attempts at history, the sanitization of history, will continue. As long as women's rights are subverted, people are going to protest. As long as workers are out here fighting to unionize, and you have these institutions, these systems, striking them down at every turn, your Amazons, your Starbucks, etc., etc., there will continue to be protests. Teachers will continue to strike for better wages, for a better what overall? Quality of life. This will continue. And so the question continues to be, so who's going to get punished? And for what? Now I want to shift a little bit. I want to look at Colombia, because I brought them up as being ground zero. And I want to look at the cowardice. No other way to describe it. They folded for $400 million. Now, this isn't one of your what ifs from social media. Would you kick your mama in the knee for $400 million? Right? That's not what this is. This is an institution that has an endowment of $15 billion. So you may be asking, well, they got an endowment of $15 billion. And what is an endowment? Endowment is just like gifts from contributors. So when you get that mail, that junk mail from colleges and universities, like, hey, Phil, Bloomsburg, Rutgers, California University of Pennsylvania, Kutztown University. I done got 4 degrees. I was about to say my famous line, but I don't know if the Fed's watching. What Martin say, right? This is where we have that governance conversation, where I'm talking to black folk. What Martin say? I ain't got the 5. So you say, you know what I'm talking about. Right. Let's look at it. This is $400 million. A small drop in a big bucket. So why fold? Because they're not scared of losing $400 million. They're scared of losing billions in future donations from people who share the same ideology of power. Again, the $400 million is meaningless. They're scared of losing billions in future donations from people who have that same mindset. Is that principle? Or is that self-preservation? As a college professor, I watch students give everything: blood, sweat, tears. Sometimes I ask them to give a little more. You know what I mean? Like I don't think that's enough. I'm playing. Nah, they give it all. I do wish, and it's just a little off. I do wish we all thought a little bit deeper, a little more critical with our thought, especially our learners. And I was no different. I didn't get that memo until my doctoral program. But they're giving everything. For what? Just to be punished for speaking truth? Degrees revoked? Careers derailed? Deportation? These are some of our brightest humans. I think we're all intelligent in our own right. We're all experts in what? Our own lives. But then when we talk about how can my expertise and my knowledge base help others, these are some of the best and the brightest who are being deported. And then you have the State Department out here bragging. They're bragging about it. Listen, if you're here, we didn't give you a visa so you can come here and become an activist. And the thing is, I don't even think they know they sound stupid saying that. But this goes into another conversation about the purpose of the college and university today versus yesteryear. And even when we're talking about predominantly white institutions, at one point, it was about knowledge, not what it is now, where folk are cogs in the wheel. They're spacely space sprockets. Y'all know about that Jetsons life. And as black folk, we know this story. Whether we protest or not, we're always negotiating our survival. Whether born here in the Caribbean, Latin America, or the continent, like Tao, we carry the legacy of colonization and second-class citizenship. I don't begrudge the student who wants to graduate quietly. I don't judge the one ready to risk it all. But we all carry the same mission, the same burden. It's all about how you frame it. Is it the mission or is it a burden? Add value to community, no matter what it is. Let's be clear. These institutions do not love you. They love your tuition. As I said earlier, they love your labor. But love, real love, that's for people, not institutions. And I say this as an HBCU professor. These schools, they're not always living up to their founding mission either. They too are worried about rankings, enrollment numbers. Why? Because they got to stay open, I guess. They fall into capitalism like the rest of us. I'm sitting here doing this on a computer. I got a tablet. I got a cell phone. This is all capitalism. But we have to be cognizant that this, and call a spade a spade. This is what it is. We all play our part. Now, what does harm reduction look like as we all participate in this? It's to say, hey, I'm using this technology to speak to the people. And so when I consider HBCUs specifically, they could be a haven for displaced students if they're brave enough. But we know that the majority of them are public institutions. And so they're grappling with integrity and funding. It's a reality. as I sat and thought about this topic, I couldn't help but compare and contrast it to the war on drugs in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. It's like the war on drugs 2.0. You got this manufactured crisis, which now is racialized fear. You have generational consequences. Mahmoud Khalil and Mamadou Tao, the murder of that white girl in Georgia, which is so disheartening. They're all being used to justify mass deportations. Just like Freeway Ricky Ross was the face of drug policy, as too is Mahmoud Khalil in First Amendment rights and legal immigrant rights. But a part of this, what's so vital, is surveillance. It's central. Just like COINTELPRO, just like ICE, just like bans on face masks, it's always about control. I sit back and think, well, where are the so-called progressive politicians? You got Bernie Sanders and AOC out here on the trail. They're talking about oligarchies, but they're not explicitly calling this out. Why? What'd I say about that Wu-Tang? Cash rules everything around me. We see what happens when you speak out against certain groups. They gonna put money behind you to get you up out the paint. Despite having issues with Jamal Bowman from New York, they got him up out the paint by putting money behind the person that was challenging him. Cori Bush, she spoke truth to power, got her about the paint. Wait. Where's Kamala? Sincerely, where's Kamala? I haven't heard from her since she lost the election. But what I do remember was when that flag burning thing happened during protests, she called it anti-Semitic. That's the same language 45/47 uses. And this is why I keep telling black folk, stop putting your faith in politicians. They are not your saviors. Again, stop putting your faith in politicians. They are not your saviors. A few years ago, I was in conversation with a dope sister, Joanna McClinton, who's here in the house. She's I believe she's the Democratic, the House Speaker. Excuse me, the House Speaker here in Pennsylvania, based out of Philadelphia. And Joanna was trying to convince me about voting, because at that point I wasn't necessarily a voter. And so I just talked to her about, well, what's your day-to-day life as a politician? And what she said to me was, Phil, listen, we spend the majority of our time trying to raise money, because money is the name of the game. And so if people are putting money behind you, you think they just giving you money just for the play of it? For the fun of it? Some might be. But nah, it's about influence. That's why you see your man Elon all up in the video. Right? Y'all remember that from the Source Awards. And both of them are in jail. But remember, they're not your saviors. But you know who I have heard from? Jill Stein, Cornel West, Claudia de la Cruz. The same people the Democratic Party fought tooth and nail to get off ballots. Folks who have been in the grassroots have always been here. And we will continue to be here. And so this message is for anyone feeling powerless, for immigrants living in fear, for students second-guessing protests. I see you. We see you. You are not helpless. And we're not done fighting. Like the ancestor Fannie Lou Hamer said, nobody is free until everybody's free. And you can't mess up the sister's words like that. So I'm going to say it again. Nobody's free until everybody's free. So I want you to ask yourself, are your actions aligning with what you say you want? Because people are risking it all for their beliefs. I'm not saying you have to, but I'm asking, if the truth can get you disappeared, what kind of freedom is that? And do remember, fury burns you out quick. So don't be posting every story you see about what's happening with this administration. Find some joy, because this ain't nothing new. Racism, patriarchy, xenophobia, they are the machine. It's the same strategy, new battlefield. And as we transition into our next topic, we're going to stick to this idea of silence. Because first they silence students, then they sanitize stories. Now museums are the new front line. 45/47 signed an executive order last week called, wait for this, Restoring Truth and Sanity to American History. I guess we all insane. And he's tapped J.D. Vance in leading it. I don't have no fancy name for him yet, but I'm going to come up with one. They say museums are overrun with what? Leftist content. They want neutrality and patriotism. What they really want is propaganda. But this ain't new. We've seen it in recent years with book bans. What the Cat in the Hat ever do to anybody? But I'm sure Moms for Liberty and all them folk out here probably like, listen, so if you put the cat in the hat, and if the cat may be black, and the hat is black and white or red and white, then this is problematic. Because that's how they be sounding. Then you have the anti-CRT laws. They have no idea what critical race theory is. That is related to legal scholarship. And now it's finding its way into other areas to understand the intersection of things like race, community, how somebody performs their jobs, poverty, etc., etc. Then we have the DEI backlash. Now, no judgment. Y'all boycotting Target. Cool. I'm here for that. But where was y'all at when the mom and pop stores were getting run out of business by these big box stores? Again, just think. Just sit and think about it. I'm not telling you. I just want you to consider it. And we also seen it with the Florida curriculum war. No shade to the people who are watching in Florida and Texas. It's different down there. It's just different. They think different. Again, hopefully those, if you're tuning in here, clearly you're not of your environment. But we see this as coordinated cultural warfare. They're not just coming for policy. They're coming for memory. But whose memory? Not ours. Not black memory. Not indigenous memory. Not queer or trans memory. Why? Because our memory is in our bones. Our memory is in our face. Our memory is where our feet are planted. We were brought here. We see the impact of this settler colony every single day of the week. When I'm riding down the street and the cop is behind me, just happenstance, I know what that anxiety feels like. That's memory. But what they're doing is they're coming for the memory of white folk. Why? Because they're trying to protect white comfort, white narrative. When you remove James Baldwin from the wall, when you reduce genocide to what's happening in Palestine to westward expansion, you're crafting public amnesia for white folk. Our stories have always stayed alive through oral history, through murals, through music, through griots, through community. I'm reminded of that scene in Above the Rim where Flip, played by Bernie Mac, was talking to Tom Shepard, played by Leon. He told him, listen, they could never erase what we were. And I need y'all to consider that when you're getting upset about the Smithsonian Museum of African American History. That place can burn to the ground. They could still never erase what we were. But now look, I understand it. Representation matters. But representation isn't liberation. We can't expect justice from systems built to erase us. And I do have a message for the black elite. Tyler Perry said he was building his own table. And he has, right? He has his own studios. No matter what you feel about his films, his content, he's built something. But where are the museums? Where are the archives? Y'all got the capital. Build institutions. That's self-determination. The Jegna, now ancestor Toni Morrison, said, the very serious function of racism is distraction. They call our stories improper because they know the truth is revolutionary. We've always told the truth, even when it wasn't allowed. So the real question is, how will you keep telling it? Now, while we hold that truth and the world keeps moving, it's now time for quick hits to keep you in the loop. First up, we have our first story from The Guardian.
Former NBA player, writer, and activist Etan Thomas wrote a story titled, Why Hasn't Middle America Given Paige Bueckers the Caitlin Clark Treatment? Paige Bueckers is leading UConn through another dominant season, coming back from injury and performing at an all-elite level. Yet, unlike Caitlin Clark, she hasn't received the same media attention or cultural celebration. Thomas suggests it's because Bueckers has aligned herself with Black America, using her platform to honor Black women, call out media bias, and practice everyday allyship with her teammates. In a country that often rewards white athletes for staying neutral, Bueckers chose principle over popularity, and that decision may be costing her mainstream support. Your thoughts?
Listen, that was such a well-written article. Such a well-written article, family. But I wish he sat with it just a little longer. There's more to unpack. So let's think about it. UConn has been dominant for over 30 years. They've won 11 championships since 1990. And we know with that type of dominance comes love. That's why we have all of these Golden State Warriors fans in the NBA. That's why we had all those Miami Heat fans. That's why we had all those Chicago Bulls fans. With dominance comes love. But what also comes with it? That Buck Nasty from the Chappelle Show. That hate. People root for the winner, but they also love the underdog. So for Caitlin Clark in Iowa, that's a homegrown hero in a red state. And I enjoyed watching her, just like I enjoyed watching Angel Reese. You're not going to sit here and have me fib and be like, yo, I've been following women's college basketball in the WNBA since forever. You're not going to hear me say that. But it was entertaining. And yes, there was a racial element behind all of that. But her having that squad on her back, It was giving Steph Curry at Davidson during March Madness 15 years ago, where you got this relatively unknown who comes to the mainstream. They come to the forefront because of how amazing their play is. And as I said, yes, race dynamics were and remain loud. That's the times that we're in. That's always been the time that we're in. We just now have social media where everybody can give their thoughts about what's happening, what's going on. So it's going to consistently be loud. You're going to have your trolls. You're going to have your bots. Heck, this is a story because it's rooted around race. But for Caitlin and her mostly white Iowa team, it was especially impactful because they went up against two black powerhouses, LSU and South Carolina, Philly's own Dawn Staley. Don't get it twisted, straight from North Philly, straight from Dobbins. I'm about 15 minutes away from there. Going against those two teams for Caitlin and that predominantly white team, it felt like a modern flip of the 1966 Texas Western versus Kentucky game. But this time the black teams were dominant. That alone had white America glued to the screen. Yes, Paige got game. Yes, it's a beautiful thing that she is an ally. Her father marrying a black woman, going up on the ESPY stage, paying homage to the black women in her life, using her white privilege to elevate sisters. But she doesn't have that perfect storm behind her. She's hampered by her school's greatness, their player lineage. Talking about Diana Taurasi, talking about Sue Bird. You talking about Rebecca Lobo. You talking about the goddess herself, Maya Moore, who went from being great at UConn to then going to Minnesota and being great and risking it all to get an innocent man out of jail who she ended up marrying. Right? There just doesn't have that cultural tension or that underdog narrative that these types of conversations really need to put her in that sphere. UConn isn't new to greatness. They're expected to win. So for sure, Paige deserves her flowers. But her allyship is more like a cherry on top to those other reasons, as opposed to being the primary reason. Our next story is also from The Guardian.
Rocks and Racism: How Geologists Created and Perpetuated a Narrative of Prejudice by Kathleen McAuliffe. McAuliffe explores how the field of geology, often seen as objective and neutral, was built on deeply racist and colonial ideas. European geologists in the 18th and 19th centuries described indigenous lands as empty, barren, or uncivilized, language that helped justify colonization and resource extraction. These early scientists weren't just studying rocks, they were shaping narratives of white supremacy that positioned Europe as advanced and everywhere else as primitive. Even today, the field still reflects those biases, from who gets cited in journals to what's taught in textbooks. Geology continues to erase indigenous knowledge and downplay the role of racism in how science developed. In short, even the rocks carry the weight of empire. Your thoughts?
I like that wrap up. Oh, listen. Walter Rodney already told us in How Europe Underdeveloped Africa that there's extraction, erasure, theft. One more time for you. Extraction, erasure, and theft. We seen it in that movie, Black Panther, when you had Killmonger, who they tried to make the villain. I'm sure if I rewatched it again, initially upon watching, I'm like, hey, he's not doing anything wrong. Now, when it comes to black folk, it's like, in Wakanda, like, nah, fam, relax. But when he went to that museum to get our stuff back, like OJ did, when he tried to get his Heisman Trophy back, oh yeah, I'm here for that. So that's the extraction, erasure, and theft that you might be familiar with. Colonization wasn't just about land. It was also about knowledge. See, the truth is, in order to colonize somebody, you got to pretend they're beneath you. You have to think that their ways of knowing are primitive. Even when indigenous peoples had geological knowledge, it was ignored. It was stolen. It was repackaged. It was renamed. How many of you have heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Yeah, that's one of them. Now, the thing with Maslow is given some credit that he got this from indigenous folk. And the pyramid was actually upside down. Where at the beginning it was, hey, you're already self-actualized when you're born. Now it's about your impact for community. Think about that. How the indigenous mindset. You come here enough. Now, how can you influence community? Whew, what could that do for a community? This isn't just geology. It's a pattern. Land, labor, language. So, I'm not surprised geology carries colonial fingerprints. I'd be surprised if it didn't. Now, if even the rocks got colonized, we definitely need a moment to ground ourselves. Here's today's Dr. Phil's Black Thought of the Day. So here's the thing. Nobody really prepares you for what happens after the show airs. Yeah, if you've seen it, I've signed up for reality TV. $1 Million Secret, Netflix, out now. But what you don't sign up for is becoming content, becoming a storyline, becoming a projection of someone else's edits, assumptions, and insecurities. I was scrolling Twitter, Reddit, all of it, and I saw Phil ain't as smart as he thinks he is. And you know what? I ain't flinch. All right, maybe I flinched just a little bit. I got up in those comments and had to clap back. But then I realized they're not reacting to me. They're reacting to a character, a composite, edited, clipped, produced, much like this show. That's television. But when you're a black man who speaks with clarity and conviction, they don't give you space to be layered. You're either the hero or the threat. Too smart? You're arrogant. Too quiet? You're shady. Too passionate? You're dangerous. This the same flattening we've been talking about all episode. Black and brown students labeled as terrorists. Protesters treated like foreign agents. Museums scrubbed clean in the name of patriotism. Legal residents disappeared under policy. It's all about control. Narrative control. Identity control. Memory control. So I remind myself, this is storytelling. TV needs a villain like it needs a hero. But I'm not here to play a role. I'm here to be whole. And I hope you are too. So I'm choosing to lead with grace. To love myself louder than the noise. Most certainly to protect my peace, my spirit, and my humanity. Because the real challenge, it ain't the camera. It's staying human in a world that keeps trying to reduce you. So here's my final question to you. Who are you when the world edits your story? And will you still choose truth, even when it costs you something? Listen, I appreciate you all. Check us out twice a week wherever you're watching or listening to this now. Stay loud, stay grounded, stay free. Peace.